Hey everybody, how's it going? Broadcasting live from Baltimore, Maryland this morning. I'm Sage Hayes. I'm here at a project called Force and the Monument Quilt in the studio. Actually, I'm really excited to maybe at the end of our interview give you a little virtual tour. We're just waiting to make sure that we're all set here. Thanks for joining us to celebrate the launch this month of the Hive directory. A lot of people are sort of saying, like, why are you driving around and interviewing all these people? And I just wanted to say that, I'm spending this time this month not only to launch the Hive directory, but what I'm realizing is I'm interviewing all these amazing people who we're going to interview Shanti, who's the studio manager, in just a minute. Is to help demystify healing and to start to normalize it and to make sure that these really progressive, innovative projects like what is happening here in this incredible studio, which I'm so excited for Shanti to tell you about, we want to make sure that we're getting out the word about how healing can happen and in all of these progressive, intersectional, thoughtful, embodied ways. So I'm really excited to be with you. I'd like to introduce Shanti Flagg. Thank you for being on with us this morning. Mm-hmm. Just a reminder to speak up a little bit. And why don't you just give us a little snapshot of who you are before we get into talking about the project?
Yeah, sure. My name is Shanti. I am the studio manager of the Monument Quilt studio. So the Monument Quilt is a project by Force. I have been working here for 2 years. And my main activities here are to help getting volunteers in to build our project. So the Monument Quilt is a collection of stories by survivors of rape, abuse, and domestic violence. Survivors make quilt squares with their stories on them, and then we sew them together and take them on tour around the country. The project is going to culminate in a final display on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., where we're going to lay out 1,500 of the 8-foot by 8-foot quilts, each with at least 4 stories on them. So that's going to be 6,000 or more stories from survivors.
Wow.
And so it'll be laid out on the National Mall to spell not alone. The idea is that the quilt will be displayed on the mall for a week. And that's the significance of the 6,000 number, because according to RAINN, that's about how many people are assaulted in the United States per week.
Wow. Okay, so I didn't know that. That's so powerful. So it's so over the next year. Until when are you collecting these quilts?
Yeah. So submissions are going to close in December.
Okay.
And then we have 6 months to finish a ton of sewing.
Right. And the culmination is on the National Mall. Laid out in the words never alone.
Not alone.
Not alone.
I can show you. Let me grab the
cool.
mock-up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is such an exciting project, and we're going to tell you it's going to basically culminate in this on the National Mall. And you can look this up on the Monument Quilt.
A little bit backwards because the camera.
Yeah. Well, people get the gist. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how people can get involved in this project. But first, let's just learn a little bit more about you. And can you just tell us a story about how you came to this work or why it's important to you?
Sure. I'm an artist. So I graduated from college about a little over 2 years ago. I've always been involved in social justice activism. When I was in high school, I volunteered for gay marriage campaigns. And then after that in college, I worked a lot in student groups for student organizing against for instance the FDA ban on gay people donating blood, and things like that. And so after I left school, I wasn't necessarily expecting to get a job in my field, but I was hoping to. So I was, when I saw a job posting for this position, I felt like I would do really well here, because I had a background in organizing, and I really appreciated the Monument Quilt's vision of healing, which is for people to share their own stories in their own words, and the idea is that we can create the most useful conversation in this country about sexual violence and ending sexual violence by listening to what people have to say about what happened to them. So that idea really made me feel like this was a good project to work for. Yeah, so that was how I ended up here.
That's really awesome that you had all this experience. None of us really expect to get a job in our field, and then you landed this job 2 years ago here in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about it's the people. It's like real people telling real stories is the way that we're gonna. One way we're gonna have a very significant impact on how we talk about sexual assault. In this country.
Yeah, because there's a history in this country of people who are doing advocacy for victims and survivors who are not of that experience themselves. And just like, them trying to like brainstorm or whatever the ways in which this problem can be addressed. And that is like, just never going to be as effective as people being able to like speak up for their own needs and like what they actually want.
Yeah. So can you talk? So let's talk a little bit about. So force. Does force stand for something?
No.
Okay. So it's like force, like
force.
Force. Right on. Awesome. So force is the umbrella. There's a handful of projects. Underneath force.
Yes.
And force is a nonprofit here in Baltimore. Been around for how long?
I think Force was founded in 2012.
In 2012, so about 4 or 5 years old, so not too old, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And the idea is that Force generates initiatives and projects that support survivor-led healing and advocacy and activism.
Yeah, I think even like Force's goal may even be a little more general than that. I think it's more like Force is committed to changing the conversation, I think is how they describe it. Because especially like several years ago when this project started, like I think today, like if you say the phrase like rape culture, there's a lot of people who aren't really into like feminism or activism who have heard that term now and might like have some idea of what it means. A few years ago, that totally wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And I do think that a lot of like some of Force's work is responsible for that kind of like mass like consciousness shift. And, people now having more of an idea that this is like a justice concern, and like a long-term problem that we can't ignore.
Yes.
So
changing the conversation and Force has been contributing to that sort of shifting. Can we actually, if you don't mind, can we talk a little bit about, because everybody who's watching this may not know what the term rape culture means.
Sure.
That would be awesome if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
totally. I know.
But okay, so I guess like I would describe rape culture as a culture where people's bodily autonomy is not respected, and just a general idea that women in particular exist for like male sexual use or just general addressing the female body as something to be used and as a commodity to be offered. And then it has like obviously like broader effects than just against women, and like, broader, like, obviously like that kind of idea that people can be objectified in that way affects like children and affects like people of color who aren't women. And I also like, I think a really important idea when we're talking about rape culture is how connected with colonialism it is, because in a lot, in how like the United States was colonized, like sexual violence was used to destroy communities, to destroy the psychological and physical health of communities who lived here, like Native communities, and that's true around the world. Right. So that is another aspect of rape culture, just the idea that sex can be used as a tool to harm people is rape culture to me. Yeah, and
as a systemic act of warfare on a particular community, Native communities of color.
And women,
trans people. Right. So and part of rape culture is the statistics too, which is the realities of that are so shocking to me always when I read them, which is 1 in 3 women.
Yeah, and I still feel that they're wildly inaccurate, and like I personally, I mean, maybe people who are watching this like know. I mean, I feel like almost every woman I know has had an experience of violence, a significant experience of violence, sexual violence. And then also I feel like the ways in which I was like socialized and trained to think about sex or whatever didn't allow me to understand some some of the violence that happened against me.
Yeah.
So until later in my life. So
Yeah.
I know that other women and other people like experience that, and some people are going to go their whole lives without acknowledging the violence that was against them. So that's like whenever I think of statistics, I always think that they're lower.
And thanks for speaking to all of that, and in particular that there's something about that piece around like the way that we're conditioned. We don't even know that it's happened to us because it's so normal, or it's so systemically just being perpetrated.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough resource or sense of self or support to be able to.
And I would call it like community gaslighting, I guess, like around people who experience violence. Just like nobody really wants to believe that it's that bad. And so I feel, when I was like coming to terms with some things that happened to me, I feel like I was looking to other people to help tell me, that it happened. And nobody can really tell you that, even people who are trying to be supportive, that is a step you have to take for yourself, to advocate for yourself, to say this happened to me. Mm-hmm. And even though there was a lot of people who might not think it was that bad, that they're wrong.
Totally. Yeah, and it makes me, I like to kind of pause because there's so much richness in all that's being shared. It makes me think about the people who are watching this that maybe have a friend or a family member, or then themselves are sort of, don't know how to be supportive to somebody where something might be surfacing around a memory of sexual violence. And do you have any sort of idea of what's helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I will also say, so on the Monument Quilt's website, we have some materials that you can download, and one of them is a PDF called How to Support Survivors.
Awesome.
And it's like a very short packet, and so that's available to anyone. And also on the website, there's materials you can download for hosting your own quilt workshop in your town, in your community, or in your house, like whatever you want.
We're going to talk more about that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I would say how to support survivors is, take what is being told to you seriously. It can be a lot if someone chooses to confide in you about an assault, and sometimes that can be triggering to yourself. So if you feel really deeply upset by what someone is telling you, I would say it is important to not overextend yourself in that moment trying to support the person, and to be honest and say, look, this is a little upsetting or whatever to me, and I can't right now. Because I think when we try to support people when we're in that state, you can just end up accidentally being harmful to yourself and to the other person.
Well said.
But yeah, if you are in a state where you're okay to listen, just listen, and listen to what the person says. Don't, even if they see, you want to encourage someone to not blame themselves for what happened to them, but you also don't want to invalidate their feelings about why what happened to them happened. And it is normal for people to blame themselves, and that's part of the process of accepting what happened to you. So I find it very important to not correct people, in how they are feeling or whatever, even if what they're saying is upsetting because you care about them and you don't want them to feel that way about themselves. I try to say, I might say I wouldn't feel that way. I don't think, but I wouldn't push it if that's how they feel.
Yeah, because it's such a deep and necessary part of healing is to be able to find words and feelings and expression for whatever is coming up, and being able to have a safe space that's just holding space.
And a lot of people simply don't know how to blame anyone but themselves,
So deep.
And it's that is a learning process, because when you have anger, it has to be directed somewhere, and most people, or a lot of survivors, and especially women, are used to directing anger only at themselves. It feels very frightening to direct anger outwards at the person who harmed you, even maybe at your community for supporting that harm in some way. Your family, your friends, maybe you're angry with them because they didn't help you, and it's okay to be angry.
Yeah, and creating spaces that people get to practice being angry outwardly.